I'm going to get different lessons than you're going to get, Keegan. And, my sons are going to get different lessons. My wife is going to get different lessons. Anybody that you know is going to get different lessons. Who the hell's in charge of that? It ain't me.
Yeah.
Right? It's not me.
Hello, and welcome back to Retrieving Sanity with your podcast host, Keegan, and this is your podcast for all mental health, addiction, recovery issues, and topics. And I've got a question for you. Do you feel like you're fighting yourself a whole bunch, or do you feel like you're struggling with some addictions or something else that's just holding you back? Well, my guest today, Darrell Dittmer, has a book all about fighting yourself and how to stop doing it. So, Darrell, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Keegan. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. I'm glad to hear that you're doing well. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you're from, what your background's like, and what inspired you to write your book about fighting yourself?
Sure. Well, my background is the Midwest, and my dad was a mechanic. My mom was just took care of us kids. I have an older brother and a younger sister. I'm the middle child. I don't know exactly what that means, but I've heard many things over the years. And it was, I guess, a fairly typical Midwestern upbringing. My dad was a Korean War veteran, a fairly tough dude. My mom was also quite tough. She came from a Southern family, and I think that equated to some toughness on her part as well. And she also had a difficult childhood. So those things, added into the mix with me in terms of how I turned out. And I was taught Midwestern work ethic. I was taught Lutheranism, Christian values, all that sort of thing. And I was handed this box of stuff as a kid, as I think that many of us are, that, hey, this is what you're supposed to believe. And this is what you, in many cases, have to believe. Or you're in trouble, or you're going to go to hell, or, all of these things that some of us end up unraveling over the years. So that's from whence I came, and I've unraveled a lot of that over the next 40 years.
Okay. So where did fighting yourself actually come into play, though?
Well, I had I started drinking, similar to many people. I was 13 years old, and I think I really liked it more than most people, more than most people that I knew. And I started getting involved in drugs and harder drugs, and getting in trouble and petty criminal activity. And it just went into dealing drugs and lying and cheating and stealing and living a life that I was absolutely not raised to live. And that was how that fight began in me. I didn't know it at that time, but that fight began in me as I was living against many of the things that I was taught. And I'm not talking, I'm just talking basic honesty and basic decency and basic kindness and all of those things that I forgot as I was chasing the next drink, chasing the next drug, chasing the next high, chasing the next, exciting thing, whatever that was. And normally the exciting thing for us at that time was damaging property or stealing or, whatever those things were. So that was where the fight began with me. And then I got, for lack of better terminology, there was an intervention done with my parents and me. They asked me to go see a drug counselor. I ended up doing it after great consternation on my part, and I went into drug treatment January 3rd of 1985. And somewhere in there, I started to recognize that I could actually live a life that was different. I could live a life that I could be proud of. I could live a life where maybe there was a chance at me being happy. Maybe there was a chance at me being content or fulfilled. And I'll end with this in terms of that particular question, Keegan, but I found a mentor in the 12 steps. I got involved in the 12 steps, and I found a mentor, and his name was Bud. And as I was whining about something going on, one of my problems, one of my issues, which were many at that point in my life, and he said, as he watched me fight things, he said, Darrell, when you stop fighting, the fighting stops. And that was where I was introduced really to the fact that my entire life to that point had been about fighting myself. And to change my life, I needed to learn how to change that within me.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's interesting that you said mentor instead of sponsor, though. Is there a reason why you chose that wording?
Well, I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand what a sponsor is in the 12 steps. Some do if they've had exposure to the 12 steps. I think more people relate to the word mentor. And I probably used sponsor, for 30 or 35 years. But as I started relating to more people, I think there's a greater understanding of mentor than sponsor.
Fair enough. I would definitely say the mentor would be someone that is outside of the 12 steps, and someone that is teaching the 12 steps alone would just be a sponsor.
Sure. Fair enough. Yeah, sure.
So, but that's interesting that you decided to look at it that way after so many years. And so you went into treatment in 1985. So you've been sober that whole time?
I have.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you.
People like you are the inspiration for people like me. So,
thank you.
Yeah, without that kind of struggle that you've put out in the world, we wouldn't know what it's like for some people to make it 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, so on and so forth. And going on for myself, I can just say that you've been sober longer than I've been alive. So congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. I'm very grateful. That's my life at this point is about gratitude. It really is. And it became that quite some time ago as I started to understand that this entire thing is a gift, and that's how I wake up, and that's how I go to bed.
Yeah, that is for sure. So whenever we're talking about gratitude and stuff, a lot of it comes from the whole aspect of what we get, right? Or what we have, and we're trying to be grateful for it. We're trying to remind ourselves that things aren't always that bad. So I think in a different light, though, you're kind of putting your authorship as a 12 steps, like an extension of your 12th step. Would you consider that so?
Absolutely. And the interesting thing, if I could just expand on that a little bit, I think that the 12 steps were an absolute indispensable guide for me in terms of I was 19 years old when I got sober, and I didn't have a clue how to be sober, much less a clue how to live. I didn't know how to get along in the world. What the hell is this thing that I'm looking at? I'm on my own. My parents don't have money to, sort of usher me along. I mean, I got to go make my way in this world. And so the 12 steps were absolutely indispensable in a beautiful way, just a beautiful guide for living. And that's how I look at them, today in my life and have for a long time. But also at some point, this work just becomes life. It just becomes how we wake up and how we conduct ourselves and how we treat others and how we treat ourselves and how we retire at night with a clear head and a contented feeling. And so the gratitude for those things for me is not as much about what I have outside of myself, because the 12 steps are designed to sort out what's inside myself.
Yeah.
Inside my head, inside my heart, inside my soul, all of those places, if you could call them places. And so what I want to give other people is how to find that contentedness inside of ourselves. And that's what I've tried to do with my books.
Okay. Yeah, I love that. So you're essentially saying the 12 steps have provided you a foundation of which that you've rebuilt your life, you've remade yourself, and from that you're also showing people, hey, this is how I did it. But you're not necessarily saying you have to do the 12 steps, but it definitely laid out the groundwork for your book, essentially, right? So is it just like 12 chapters long?
No, I love that question. No, it's not. My first book is really a memoir. It's my story. It goes into my upbringing and dives a little deeper into the story, which the story of meeting Bud, my sponsor, all of those things, and just kind of takes the path of my life. And then I would say that's probably 75% of the book is some of the madness, or a lot of the madness. And a lot of it not madness. A lot of it was just me madness, right?
Yep.
Like the whole world isn't screwed up because I'm screwed up. I'm screwed up. And then the world becomes less screwed up. Maybe not nowadays.
Yeah.
But as I get better, my perception of the world changes. But the last 25% of the book is just a lot of the lessons that I've learned and how I go about conducting myself now, which is very different from from how I conducted myself then, and also and I think this is crucial. It's not an overnight thing. It's something that takes time, and it's something that takes patience. And I look at everything as a muscle that we have to build.
Yep.
Whether it's breathing practice or quietness or patience or determination or perseverance or hope, or all of those things are things that we have to practice. Gratitude is a muscle.
Yep.
We have to practice over time, but it's not about getting from here to here. It's about everything that happens in between, and that's the coolest part. Is right as we can see ourselves change, and we can adapt to life differently as we change, and I think that's anyway, I know I went into a lot of stuff there based on your question, but
no, that's fine.
But it's big stuff.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Here on Retrieving Sanity, we're all about chasing rabbit holes because it's a train all on its own. We never know where a conversation might lead, and that's the thing, is that a lot of the time life is like that. We don't know what's right around the corner, and so we never know what someone is going to need to hear through a conversation that they may find irrelevant at the moment. Maybe they'll just tune in and just be like, oh, hey, I needed to hear that real quick, and then maybe that was it. Who knows? So by all means, if you feel like going off on a tangent because you feel like something was relevant and you need to provide a little bit of backstory or whatever, by all means.
Thank you.
Of course. But with that being said, what was one of the lessons that you have in your memoir book? But let's say, what is one of the lessons that you did not like the process of learning? It's probably all of them, right?
Every single one. Yeah. Well, the funny part is, or not funny part, sometimes the tough part is. So you had mentioned, we don't know what's going to happen next with life. And I agree 100%. And back in the day, and getting sober is one thing, getting straight and clean is one thing. And then living life can be really, really difficult when we first start.
Yeah.
But it can also be, we can turn that on its head if we do it long enough, and life becomes 1,000 times better than it may have been had we, decided to just, I'm going to get straight and I'm not going to do anything with myself.
Yeah.
Right? We have to improve.
Yeah.
And so my, when I was, just getting sober, and then through however many years of life, I was trying to learn how to live it and all that sort of thing. There were times when I'd just be like, man, I just can't believe it. I don't know what's going to happen next. This sucks. Right?
Yeah.
Like, what's going to happen next? This just blows. And then, now and for a long time, it's turned into, man, I can't wait to see what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
Because it's like, holy crap, like life is pretty cool. And it doesn't mean bad things stop, or difficult things. I don't want to say bad things, because everything teaches us something.
Yeah.
But difficult things can happen. I mean, I've lost some very important people in my life this year. I just lost my wonderful dog that I I love that dog. His name was Dexter, and he passed a little over a week ago. And
oh man,
it's been killing me, and I can't talk about it that much because I'm going to start crying now. But one of the things I learned, we talked about lessons, or you asked about lessons, and one of the lessons that's been difficult for me to learn because I grew up in a fairly tough environment was it's okay to feel whatever's coming down the pike. And it's okay to be sad, and it's okay to cry, and it's okay to expose myself and be vulnerable. Not as just like, oh, I'm going to start, crying on the bus and, everybody's wondering what's going on with me. But in situations, that I can start crying in front of my wife. I can start crying in front of my boys. I can, and everybody's cool, and I don't feel judged, and I don't feel like, oh, I can't do that. And, that's a big lesson. Some of the things that I think were another one that was difficult for me was honesty. And that may sound weird because honesty is like, well, you just got to tell the truth about stuff.
But
true, but I got to tell the truth to me. That's the big one.
Yep.
Because I have to tell the truth to Daryl and about every aspect of life. So part of the book, my first book, is about treating my body, my mind, my heart, and my soul correctly.
Yeah.
And with honor and honoring every part of myself. And so what does that mean? That means I need to eat right. That means exercise is a good thing for me. That means things that I discover about life that I know are better for me than what I had previously been doing. I need to be honest with myself and implement those things. Yeah. Because, and I mean that with body, mind, heart, and soul. I don't, it's not just what we eat, but it's everything. And I think a crucial part of this sobriety and recovery and sanity thing is I can't lie to myself and do things that I know are bad for me and continue to do them.
Yeah.
And that's a tough thing. That takes time, and that takes sometimes, and the reason those lessons are hard is because sometimes it takes bad consequences for me to get it.
Yeah.
And I'm a big believer, and I've seen it happen in my life for a long time. If I don't change, life is just going to be handing me that stuff again and again and again and say, oh, you didn't learn? You suck. Here you go. Here you go. Here you go. And that's how it happens. And that's how it happened to me. And so anyway, I hope that helps expand on your question a little bit, just in terms of the hard lessons. I've never learned a lesson because it's been easy.
Yeah.
Every lesson I've learned is because I've had some kind of consequence that is helping me to change if I listen.
No, if you listen, that's the key word, right? And that's how you break that pattern, though. And it sucks, though, because that honesty really does have to be that self-honesty, because we can tell the truth to ourselves at a different level every time I think we go deeper into our healing journeys. And I think that after a certain point, there is that, like, as objective truth as we can get, where it's like, oh yeah, this is exactly what happened, and this is my part in it, and this is where I can do different next time. But I think the important part is to not beat ourselves up whenever we recognize that truth, whenever it's like, oh, I did do this, so yeah, that was a part of me, but it's not I'm a fuck up, it's just I fucked up. So
right. 100%, man. I could not agree more. And there's a chapter in my book. Maybe it's not a chapter. It's one of the lessons I've learned. It's in the beginning of the book, but I had to learn how to turn off the ass kicking machine when I first started around the 12 step tables, and that's what they called it back then, the ass kicking machine. But it's me duking it out with me and telling myself, oh, you suck. and you don't know how to do things, and you're a bad person, and you're this and you're that, and why did you do this and why did you do that? And as you mentioned, as we go deeper, it gets a little different, because I can pounce on like, oh, you shouldn't have thought that, or oh, you shouldn't have felt that, or wow, you can't, you're a person living a spiritual life. You're not allowed to blah, blah, blah. And I could beat the shit out of myself.
Yeah.
And part of the when I stop fighting lesson is I can turn the ass kicking machine off. And sometimes, you just got to turn the volume down a little time. And then at some point it can go off, and I can be in the windshield as opposed to the rear view mirror. Ooh. I can continue moving forward as opposed to looking behind me and saying, oh, I regret that, or I feel guilty about that, or it's just stuff that happened. And as long as I'm committed to doing better and being better, then the entirety of my life will change, and I don't have to carry that guilt.
Yeah. So that is a first time hearing that term for me, even though I've been in the rooms, just ass kicking machine. I guess it's an older term. Too much of a safe space in some places, I guess. But whenever it comes to that end of things, yeah, it's really hard to turn off. And like you said, sometimes it's just turning it down a little bit, like one notch at a time. But that's also the thing too, is that sometimes it just gets put back to 11 all of a sudden whenever life happens. So how do you stop? Does it still turn on every now and again for you, and you just have to like catch it real quick? Or how does your managing of that machine look nowadays?
Nowadays, it is a very conscious and intentional sort of way of living that I embrace. Okay. And that doesn't mean that I don't screw things up, because I do. It doesn't mean that I don't get pissed, because I do. And it doesn't mean that I'm in any way perfect or striving for perfection. Somebody told me a long time ago around the tables, he said, well, just because we're never going to be perfect doesn't mean we shouldn't strive for it. And I thought that held a lot of truth for a long time. And then I thought, you know what? That's just a way to flip the ass kicking machine back on.
Oh, yeah.
And so I feel like guarding against, and I mean guarding lightly, but for me, living intentionally, living with the decisions that I make, and understanding that every decision I make has a consequence, and that it's okay. Now, so we'll talk about the body for a minute. Okay. If I decide, which I've already decided, that, tonight I'm going to eat some crappy food because you know what? Dexter died and I am bumming and it sucks. And you know what? I just feel like eating crappy food. Yeah. And I'm going to do that. Yeah. And I've already forgiven myself for doing that. Not that I needed to, but I'm just making the point. I'm not going to beat the crap out of myself for, downing some ice cream and some buttered popcorn and whatever the hell else I want to do. Because I'm giving myself permission to do that. Yeah. And I think that is a really important thing to understand, that we can forgive ourselves for things that we're doing, from time to time that maybe aren't exactly in line with how we profess that we're, trying to live. And I think that's okay. I get pissed off. My wife and I have, we have little battles from time to time. Yeah. That's just part of life. And forgiving ourselves. The key is, for me, not saying things, and I know what those things are, that I'm going to regret later. Yeah. I would rather shut myself off, shut my mouth off, stop, than say something that I'm going to regret. So as we go along this journey, there's a maturation process. and there's a discovering process or discovery process about ourselves, I know what's going to make me feel regret.
Mm-hmm.
And 99% of the time, I don't do the shit that's going to make me feel regret. And that's what we need to get to.
Yeah.
That understanding of ourselves, and then the decision about our behaviors that I'm just not going to do the stuff that's going to make me feel guilty.
I love that. And I feel like I hear a couple of different things there. One is allowing yourself to express yourself, which is entirely healthy, which needs to be done. But two, you're also recognizing that future actions may not line up with where you want to be, but at the same time, you're not making that into your habit. You're not making that your new thing. You're saying, I'm human and I'm going to mess up, but I feel this way, so it's okay to feel this way. So I'm going to do it until I don't feel that way, right? But that can be a little bit of a slippery slope if someone takes that kind of mindset and applies it to the wrong thing, though, right? But that's where you're coming along saying you have to really know yourself to a certain point and everything like that. You can't do that and say, I mean, that would be the same aspect of it's better to ask for forgiveness than it is for permission, right? So,
right. Yeah. I will move about my day, and I will, there's a bug on the floor or a spider, and I'm not a huge fan, not a big fan of spiders, but I'm not going to kill them. I'm going to try to take a piece of paper and shoo them out the door or out the window. And while I'm flipping out, like, cause I don't want to touch a spider. But so if I were to, step on that spider, I know myself at this point where I wouldn't feel good about it.
Yeah.
Or this ant or whatever it is. And I know that's kind of a silly example, but it's an example of knowing what's going to, resonate inside of me as the right thing, or what's going to resonate, more from an ill perspective as the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And these are all things I have to figure out. And it's really important to figure those things out for ourselves.
Yeah. Okay. So you're saying to look at life through a lens of discernment. And the only way to get that discernment is unfortunately through experience. So.
Right. Absolutely agree. What we've been talking about brings to mind for me boundaries, which everybody talks about boundaries these days, right? It's we didn't have boundaries back when I was getting sober. What was taught then was you teach people how to treat you.
Yeah.
And so I tell people all the time, I'm like, boundaries aren't for them. Boundaries are for me.
Ooh, yeah.
So, and the reason I say that is because I will teach people how to treat me. If somebody comes at me in a way that doesn't sit right with me or doesn't resonate with me, they will be the first one to know, not acceptable.
Yeah.
It's not going to work. Go back to the drawing board. And I'm very stern about that. And I don't care whether it's business or personal or whatever it is. We used to say, and I don't know if they say it anymore, you can tell me, Keegan, but never be a doormat. Be kind, be gentle, be loving, be the best you, or I can be the best me that I can be. But that doesn't mean let people run over you.
Yep.
And that's what boundaries are. Boundaries are, you know what? I love you and you're wonderful. And, sometimes you're not. But I'm not going to take that behavior.
Yeah.
And so if we're going to have a relationship, please rethink. And if we're not going to have a relationship, that's okay, because I'm not going to put up with it. And those are things that come as we gather our strength in recovery. And I don't care what we're recovering from. It could be, any sort of drug or alcohol or food or sex or gambling or some sort of I just don't feel good about my life, or, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. We have to recover.
Yeah.
We have to recover. And as we recover, we discover these things, and then we have to add those into, the mix of our life. And And it's interesting because there's a little bit of a paradox here,
Mm.
because the road will get narrower.
Mhm.
And Bud, my sponsor, would say that, and I'm using sponsor very intentionally now, but Bud would say the road gets narrower.
Mhm.
But along with the road getting narrower, the freedom becomes unbelievable.
Mhm.
And I think that's a really cool paradox, because I can get away with less, but what that does to me on the inside is expands everything about me internally.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. And a lot of people don't really understand that paradox either, because that's one of my favorite ones that I came across whenever I was in my rehab. You know, talking to my therapist, I was like, oh, holy shit. You know, like, now that I know the things that I can't do, that also lets me know a lot of things that I can do at the same time. And she was like, you get it. And I was like, huh, that's weird. And it's very compelling at the same time, because it gives us permission to try things that maybe we didn't want to try before, because we thought that was one of the things that we can't do or shouldn't do, you know.
Right.
But with all that being said, real quick, where can people find your book?
Sure. Thank you, Keegan.
Of course.
My books, the first book is When I Stopped Fighting, and the subtitle is The Unexpected Joy of Getting My Head Out of My Ass. That is available on, I think it's very appropriate. That is available on Amazon.
Okay.
And my second book, When You Stop Fighting, The Road You're On Is Your Own Ass Fault, that is also available on Amazon. If you can tell, there's a theme there that we have to take responsibility for our lives. So those are both on Amazon, and my site is right up there, which is DarrellDittmer.com, DarrellDittmer.com, and you can find my books and some journals and that sort of thing, and any information you wanted about me on my site.
Oh, thank you for that, sir. And
Absolutely.
yes, everyone out there, definitely be sure to check this out, because there's a lot of good stuff in this conversation, so I can only imagine the rest of everything that's in the books. But I have to ask real quick, what's your favorite step whenever you were going through the steps?
So, I'll try to be as quick as I can about this. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity.
Okay.
And the reason that I mention that step is because I came with a box of things that I was told that I had to believe. And at some point, I had to pull all those things out of that box and put them on a table. This is how I envision it. And I put all those things on a table, and I said, which of these things is helping me with my life? Kind of like similar to what you did with your therapist, right? You're like, okay, what fits, what doesn't, what can I do, what can I not do? But I looked at all those things and I said, you know what? This has got to go because it's not helping me. This has got to go because it's making me feel guilty. This has got to go because it sucks, whatever. And what things can I keep? And what things can I expand upon? And what things can I adopt that are new? And so for me, that's all in step 2, because I have to somehow develop a faith, and it doesn't have to be God or, anything like that. It can be whatever you want it to be, but I have to develop a faith in something bigger than me. And it started off as that big, it started off as that big. And now I trust life. And I choose to call it God, the universe, truth. I don't limit my belief system. And I think that's an important thing for people to consider, is your belief system can be this big or it can be unimaginably big. And I highly recommend unimaginably big. And that, to me, goes back to the second step.
Ooh, I love everything that you just said, because there's a lot in there too. And the first question I do have to ask though is, because a lot of people relegate addictions or problems to moral behaviors or moral beliefs and stuff like that, do you feel like you're getting rid of your beliefs, getting into recovery, altered your moral map of sorts?
I think it did over time.
Okay.
I think we all have an internal mechanism where we know
Mm-hmm.
this is right for me and for other people,
Mhm.
and this is not right for me and or for other people.
Yeah.
So, and I believe some clarity comes when I get rid of the drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
Additional clarity comes as I consciously try to live in a way that aligns with, and I'm not saying moral from a biblical perspective or
Mhm.
anything like that.
Yeah.
I'm saying moral from the perspective of knowing inside of me what is right and what is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And as we continue to go down that path, it gets very, very fine in terms of the tolerances
Mhm.
of how things feel. I can tell if something's not right immediately.
Mhm.
And I can tell if something is right immediately, like, wow,
Mhm.
So there's a moralness to our growth, or a moral
Mhm.
component to our growth. But I would also say that it's not necessarily based on everything you hear in the world as morals.
Mhm.
It's more based on what's going on in here.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really well put, and it does make me also ask though, because you said someone can have really small beliefs or unimaginably large beliefs, and I'm on that latter end. And I only ask because I've heard other people say that you can't do a sobriety, you can't do recovery without doing certain steps. So what do you have to say to those people? The ones that say you have to do it this way or you will fail.
I don't believe them.
Good.
And because one of the things that I've learned, and I've watched this with hundreds, if not thousands of people that I've talked to or tried to help or whatever it is, I am not in charge of their journey. And for me to say that I know the way and they don't know the way is me trying to be in charge of somebody else's journey. The only person that I know what's right for at any given time, what the right whatever is at any given time, is for my life. And so all of those lessons that we talked about a little earlier, like I'm going to get different lessons than you're going to get, Keegan. And, my sons are going to get different lessons. My wife is going to get different lessons. Anybody that you know is going to get different lessons. Who the hell's in charge of that? It ain't me.
Yeah.
Right? It's not me. It's, and so I think there's a, what's the word? There's a self-absorption malady involved with someone who thinks they know what's right for everyone else. I truly do.
Yeah.
And so that needs to be looked at by that person, in my opinion.
Okay.
I hope that helps, at least from my perspective, answer that.
Yeah, for sure. It did. And you raised up a really good point about morals. And you said that what your moral standpoint is not what's good for others in the moment, it's what's good for you. And you also said in the moment, and I think that's really good to highlight, because a lot of the times morals aren't applied to a situation in the middle of the situation. It's applied to it in hindsight, going like, oh, did I act right in according to my beliefs? Not, I acted in this life-threatening situation in this way because that was a moral thing to do. It was, no, I had to do it, and I may regret what I did, but I also had to do it at the same time, So, but you're also saying in some situations like that, where you may have to do something against your own beliefs, you're saying that this also is a way to not fight yourself in that regard too, right?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite words in the English language is allow.
Ooh.
And I put something in my phone the other day. Let me just look it up real quick if I could, because things come to my brain all the time. So here it is. What am I doing with my life? Am I attacking life? Am I resisting life? Or am I allowing life?
Ooh.
This is all third book stuff, so sneak preview.
Okay.
Excuse me. Anyway, so what that means is I am in much better physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional shape if I allow life to to just allow it to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And without judgment, without condemnation, and not to say that we don't do those things,
Mm-hmm.
but one of my good friends, who's also an author, he says, life knows how to life. And it's so true. I don't have to think about breathing. I don't have to think about my heart beating.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to think about the planets moving. I don't have to think about gravity working. I don't have to think about any of these things.
Yeah.
They just work.
Mm-hmm.
And the more that I can apply that to my life,
Mm-hmm.
the more my life works. Now, how do we apply that to morality or the question of morality? And
Mm-hmm.
as regards me, because I think there are some universal truths that are important for sure.
Yeah.
But in terms of how I'm experiencing life and reacting or acting toward life, and on, in my little microcosm of me, I'm either allowing life and sometimes giving myself permission to do things that aren't necessarily like, the perfect thing. Right? I mean, we have to do that sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I truly believe that, because I know I'm going off a little bit.
No,
but,
you're good.
But we are, as a person who has an addictive personality, as in a person who's, if you're going to classify me, you say like, oh, that dude's type A. That's just how I am. And I think a lot of us are built that way. I think a lot of people in recovery are built that way. And so can I take something and take it to the nth degree? Absolutely, I can. I have that capacity. I'm really good at that shit. But how can I learn to allow myself to slow down? Can I allow myself, because to me, and this gets into meditation and breath work and some things that I practice, life is best experienced as what's it telling me? Not what is life telling me? What's life telling me when I'm quiet? What's life telling me when I'm just breathing and listening? Or am I just zipping around on my phone? Am I doing this? Am I doing that? Am I not stopping? Am I just wearing myself out? Go, 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 go. It's my choice. Am I going to live my life that way? Sometimes I do. Or am I going to take the time to be quiet? Sometimes I do. Yeah. And I think there's got to be that balance to figure out, what works for me in my life. And the morality comes in. And what am I judging? To be, I don't have to be judgmental unless I say, you know what, I'm going to have that piece of coconut cream pie tonight. And then I have 3 meals a day, every day for the next month. Right? Like, what am I doing either to myself or for myself? And that's am I resisting life, and am I attacking life, or am I allowing life?
Okay.
There's a lot in there.
Oh, there's a lot of really good stuff though. And
thank you.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, you do raise up that good point of like, am I allowing life to happen? And I mean, I had a literal moment of that this morning myself, because I was sitting here going through Reddit, going through Facebook, and I was like, what am I doing? Like, I need to actually do something with my weekend. I need to be a little bit more productive, and not the judgmental type of way, like beating myself up, but I was asking myself legitimately, like, what am I doing besides just scrolling for the next emotional hit of like, oh, that made me angry. Maybe I'll find something that makes me happy. Oh, that made me happy. Maybe I'll find something else that make me happy. Oh, that made me angry. I need something else that makes me happy again. And so I decided to just put a stop on that. And there's a little nature spot right outside my apartment. So I just went out there and just connected with nature for a little bit, walked around, and then I found some animal bones. And so I was like, oh, hey, that's really cool. I like animal bones. I like just weird stuff. So I brought it up to the apartment. Now I just got to figure out how to clean it real quick. But It did allow me that portion of my day to reconnect with nature, and that's a big part of who I am and part of my identity, you know, because in that stillness, I can hear thoughts that otherwise are a little bit not there, like the thought that said, look at the ground, mind your steps, because you never know what you'll find. And then here I find a little bit of a trinket that I can say, oh, look. So,
Awesome.
yeah. And,
That,
oh, go ahead.
no, I was going to say, that's really cool, Keegan. I mean, that is exactly it. And from so many perspectives, like I'll find myself, you know, the whole book thing kind of got me involved more with social media and this and that. And sometimes I'll be like, I think they call it doom scrolling, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And I'll be flipping around and I'm like, okay, enough, you know, like just whatever, dude, knock it off.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll have to change. But, and like you said, it's, you know, I don't need to chastise myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't. I just change what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's completely cool. And it was a perfect example, what you just mentioned. Like, okay, go find some quiet,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and that's, there's nothing wrong with either one.
Mm-hmm.
But it might be something that's you know, that I don't want to continue doing if it becomes hurtful to me
Mm-hmm.
or other people. Am I doing that
Mm-hmm.
and not paying attention to someone I should be paying attention to, or, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So,
yeah, you raise a really good point, because a lot of the times whenever we're self-centered, whenever we're sitting there thinking about everything that we're doing, we're mostly focused on, well, this is how I'm feeling in the moment. This is what's happening to me. Why isn't the world responding to how I feel, you know? And a lot of the times it's because a lot of different factors, whether it's because we didn't teach other people or teach the world how to treat us, or maybe it's because we didn't set the boundaries within ourselves. Maybe it's because of we were led astray at one point and we were taught to believe something that just didn't sit right within ourselves, you know? And so there's a whole lot that is going on with everything in sobriety, you know? And it's an interesting thing because it's not just sobriety that we're talking about whenever we're looking at it through this lens. We're just talking about healing and growing and sadly kind of just maturing. You know, a lot of people don't want to hear that, especially someone that's like, oh yeah, I'm in my 20s, I'm in my 30s, I'm mature, like, whatever.
yeah. Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, so my first question real quick is, do you think that we could have you back on the show in the future? Because there's a lot to go on right here in this conversation, and I know we could go on for a long time too.
We could. I'd love to, Keegan. Yeah, I've enjoyed it immensely. You know, there's, and this has come to my mind a couple of times as we've talked, so I'll just say it. But, you know, in the 12 steps, there's, I don't know if it's all of them, but right, the coin to thine own self be true. And sometimes, you know, people, I don't think have heard the rest of that, that piece, which is from Hamlet, Shakespeare.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes exactly to what you were just saying, but it's to thine own self be true. Well, first, the first part is, and this above all, to thine own self be true. And then it must follow, as the night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man.
Ooh.
And it's there's so much to unpack in that. And I've been ruminating on that for years. There was this restaurant in New York. It was along the top of the restaurant. And I read it for the first time. I was like, holy crap.
Huh.
And so I've been ruminating on that ever since. But the bottom line is, and I'd invite anyone that wants to ruminate on that, just stick it in here and let it go. But it basically what it means to me is, if I'm being true to me, that includes being true to everyone else. It just does. And because if I do you wrong, I'm not doing right by me.
Yeah.
And because that's one of those things, you know, the resonance, where does it sit? And so anyway, I wanted to bring that up. But yes, I'd love to come back on, Keegan. It's been a riot. It's been great talking.
Heck yeah. I'm honored to have you on, and I'm super pleased to hear that you'll come back on. And thank you for elucidating that quote, because that is one of the ones that I think is really prominent to a lot of people's lives without them really knowing it. Because authenticity is one of those things that is promoted nowadays, I would say, and widely so. But the thing is that authenticity to a lot of people just means I'm going to show up how I want to show up, and it's not necessarily saying this is how I'm going to show up because that's how I feel I should show up. And that's part of the thing too, right? Because there's different levels of authenticity, and if I'm to be honest and authentic with myself, that should entail being honest and authentic with others. But if I'm not, then that would automatically start that inner turmoil of like, well, where is the disconnect? Where is the dissonance happening? And that is probably what messes up a lot of people, is just sitting there saying, if I feel and believe and think this way, then why did I do this in regards to the situation, this person, or myself even? And I think that that's where a lot of inner fights come from, right?
Absolutely. That is the inner fight. I mean, that's, there's a lot of shit to fight with ourselves, but that's a big one because we're not being true to ourselves. And once we're not being true to ourselves, man, the battle's raging. And then if we recognize that, and then we, chastise ourselves for that, that's more fighting.
Yeah.
You could just take that down any number of rabbit holes. So yeah, there's the fight can go very deep, and the fight can get very subtle. And this is just a little side note, but sometimes when I used to meditate, and I do meditate now, but as I was meditating earlier on in my life, a thought would grab me, and and I would just start taking off with it, and then I would bring myself back. But as I was bringing myself back, I'm like, dude, you suck at this. You this whole meditating thing isn't for you, man. You can't shut that bean off on top of your shoulders. And but see, that's the fight, and the allowing is that same thing happens. I'm meditating, a thought comes, I chase it a little bit, but then I just allow it to come back to the quiet. And there's that word allow again, as opposed to, come on, Darrell, pull yourself together, man. Like all that stuff that doesn't have to be included. And that allowing part of life is just so crucial to waking up in the morning with a smile on your face and going to bed at night with a smile on your face.
Yeah. And I think right there is also allowing yourself to feel whatever it is you're feeling in the moment.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely. That is, and it's very tempting. And I'm the same, I'm the same as everybody else on the planet. It's, we want to always feel good.
Yeah.
Right? Like we want to always feel good. And there was a time in my life where I was so sick of feeling bad that I just wanted to feel differently. And I found out that what allows me that thread in my life of not doing this, like where it can just kind of be cool and chill. It doesn't matter, for the most part, like, good stuff's going to happen, bad stuff's going to happen. As we allow those things to happen, we don't have to, we can just feel them. And the whole this too shall pass thing gets more and more meaningful over time. All those little sayings get more and more meaningful over time because once we start to understand that this too shall pass means the good stuff passes and the bad stuff passes. And it's just life.
Yep.
It's just life. I can cry my eyes out about my dog, but it doesn't mean I have to have a bad day.
Yeah.
I could just cry my eyes out about my dog, and hug my wife, and we'll cry for a few minutes, and and then we move on. And it doesn't have to mean, oh, Darrell, you're, what's wrong with you, man? You're crying about it. Like, well, yeah, of course I am.
Yeah.
I love that dog.
Yeah.
And so anyway, it goes back to the fighting. It goes back to telling ourselves oh, I shouldn't think this, or oh, I shouldn't be feeling this.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you're thinking is what you're thinking. And
Yep.
and I don't think we're necessarily in charge of that. We can quiet ourselves and we can slow some of those things down
Mm-hmm.
and maybe see more and experience more of what that is. But I think thoughts are just bombing us from everywhere. I don't
Yeah.
think it's stuff that the more you try to control your thoughts, I think that's part of the fight.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Because you're like, you're waging a battle, like, oh, I can't think that, or
Mm-hmm.
and then it pops in again. Well, what are you doing, you idiot? Why are you thinking that? That's part of the fight. So anyway, there's a lot of things that we can do to ourselves
Mm-hmm.
that we don't have to do. And much of my message is really that, like, let's start exploring what we can do for ourselves as opposed to chastising ourselves for what we think we're doing to ourselves.
Yeah. And I think that that's a beautiful way to look at life too, because I think that it's a message that I needed to hear a long time ago, and I think it's one that not a lot of people hear nowadays. So thank you for getting that message across. I got one more question for you, if you don't mind.
At all.
Alrighty. So, Daryl, the name of this podcast is Retrieving Sanity, and we explore how all facets of living life impact mental health. Looking back at the incredible motley adventures of your life, what does retrieving sanity personally mean to you today, and what's one practice or perspective you believe is crucial for anyone else on that journey?
I love the question, Keegan. I really do, because I was thinking about retrieving sanity before we started talking, because I love the name of the podcast.
Thank you.
And I was thinking, for me, I thought, is it retrieving sanity?
Mm.
Is it restoring sanity? Is it creating sanity?
Mm.
How does that sit within me in
Uh-huh.
terms of how that applies to my life?
Mhm.
And I like retrieving sanity because I feel like we all started, and I mean started, when I was this big, sane.
Uh-huh.
That's my personal opinion.
Yeah.
And life starts to happen,
Mm-hmm.
and it's more difficult for some, whatever that means.
Mhm.
It can be tougher for some coming out of the gate. It can be less tough for some coming out of the gate. It can be unbearable for some coming out of the gate.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like life hands us, and this is, again, what we're not in charge of. Life is handing us this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And in my experience, life handed me what it handed me.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, I had to understand that, it's on me to, and I like visualizing this sort of internally, but it's up to me to reach over and retrieve the sanity that I came in with. Because I'm going to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole here.
Go for it.
Sobriety to me and recovery to me, I should say recovery, because it's about recovery. A lot of it's about taking out the garbage.
Yeah.
A lot of it is about what is not working that I need to discard, whether it's other humans in my life, whether it's the way that I perceive or perceive things, or what I allow to happen in my life that I could change.
Mm-hmm.
Am I engaging in behaviors that I need to do differently? Am I, it's that part of that razor blade that gets narrower. And so, but I've gathered, I think of the Beverly Hillbillies, right? Their car, it's just full of stuff.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times when we get sober, or we come to a place where we know that we need to change, we've got a Beverly Hillbillies mobile full of stuff that we need to discard.
Yeah.
And I think that is what stands in the way of retrieving our sanity. Because we've got that big load of stuff. And I think that's important. And I would say for people listening, you mentioned one thing that maybe to consider in terms of retrieving that sanity. I think it's to understand that we don't have to end our life or go through our life with the same belief system that we came into life with. Because a lot of that belief system is included in the Beverly Hillbillies mobile full of stuff that we're carrying along with us. And so we need to sort it out, and we need to find out what works for us, and we need to put time into understanding that we can change. And I'm going to go down something else, but I think this is really crucial.
Okay.
We're allowed to be fulfilled in our lives, and we're allowed to be contented. And I don't use happy because I feel like happy is a little more fleeting.
Yeah.
But contentment and fulfillment with who I am is absolutely possible.
Yeah.
And I don't have to wake up feeling angst, and I don't have to wake up feeling upset, and I don't have to wake up feeling stressed.
Yeah.
But there's work that goes into changing those things about me or about my life or about, and I'll just say this because it keeps coming into my head. If there's a job that I'm just miserable at, my dad worked for 42 years at General Motors, being a mechanic.
Ooh.
But that's what people used to do. And I don't think it was fun all the time.
Yeah.
And, and he worked a lot of overtime and, to support his family and that sort of thing. People will do that for 40 years and stay in a place that they don't like for a long time. And I mean this as respectfully as I can mean it, but you don't have to.
Yeah.
You don't have to stay in situations, whether it's people or jobs or whatever. You might have to for a period of time, but life can change, and we're in charge of changing it.
Yeah.
One more point, and I know I'm going off.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
Blame is poison.
Ooh.
And the more I can learn to not blame my neighbor or my sister or my job or whatever it is, and take responsibility for making changes to certain aspects of my life that require that attention, I'm getting those messages for a reason.
Yeah.
And the more I resist those messages, the more I'm going to hurt. The more I respond to those messages and perhaps change something, the better my life is going to get. So how do I retrieve sanity? All of that stuff. And there's a lot more, but we're allowed to have a life that we love. And I just want everybody to know that you're allowed to have a life that you love. And it's just a matter of finding out what that is. And the journey is the exploration is the beautiful part of that.
I love that. I'm hearing a lot of different themes there, but I'm hearing like to explore, to find what is right with one's own self, and to really just have fun with it too. I think is another thing I'm hearing, and there's to have fun. So
absolutely crucial. Absolutely crucial. And I'm going to make this really quick.
Okay.
I'm fine with time, but I don't know what your time is. So, and I'm not a biblical guy, like I'm not a religious guy at all. But there is a verse, and there are verses in the Bible that are a lot of wisdom. Just like there are passages in any book that's wisdom, and that's how I look at it. But there's a verse that says, "Unless you become like little children, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven." And to me, heaven isn't a place. Heaven is in here. And unless I'm having fun and I'm able to enjoy my life like a child and live in the moment and experience beauty and touch beauty and feel beauty and all of those sorts of things, I'm not going to be able to get to that place. And so I truly believe in having the attitude of a child, if you've ever seen a child be mesmerized by something, they're right in the moment.
Yeah.
And am I taking the time, like your animal bones, and being in nature? Am I taking the time to be in those moments? And those are the crucial moments to reverberate throughout the rest of my time.
Ooh, I really like that. So whenever you get those moments that really resonate with you, reflect on those. So,
Absolutely.
I love that. Well, Daryl, we are at the end of this episode, unfortunately. So everyone out there, thank you for listening to Retrieving Sanity on WDJY 99.1 FM. And as always, go on over to YouTube for the up-to-date episodes, Spotify, Podbean, wherever else you find podcasts. And don't forget to go to Daryl's website. It is www.darrelldittmer.com. That is DARYLDITTMER.com. So, Daryl, we will see you on in the future, and I thank you very much for just being on today, sharing your wisdom and your experiences with us, because you're helping make the world a better place. So thank you.
Thank you, Keegan. I really appreciate it.
Love yourself if you can, love others if you can, but you gotta love yourself first. So with that being said, we will see y'all next week, and y'all have a great rest of your day. Shalom.